Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another IS-PEC Talks. Today we have Laura Boiera with us. Laura is the head of partnerships and networks of Instituto Veradas in Brazil, and her work is focused on how evidence is actually used in real policy settings, especially when the path is not neat, linear, or fully formalized, which I'm not sure it ever is. She has been deeply engaged in building bridges across research, policy, and practice, with particular attention to equity, collaboration, and the institutionalization of evidence use. Laura also serves in important regional and global evidence spaces, including the Latin American and Caribbean Evidence Hub and the World Health Organization EVIPNET community, which is where I met her, and the Evidence Synthesis Collaborative Infrastructure. Across all of this work, she brings a perspective that is both deeply grounded in context and highly relevant to anyone thinking seriously about how evidence becomes a part of the decision-making process. Her framing of evidence use in Brazil as a story of informality and radical collaboration opens up such an important conversation, not only about systems and structures, but also about relationships, trust, creativity, and power. Laura, thank you so much for being with us. We're thrilled to learn from you. So first, why don't you first just tell us a bit about how you got involved in this work?
Well, that's lovely. I'm so happy to be here. And it's always strange recapping. After so many years, it seems the story changes, right? But I think the most honest answer is just that I became a civil servant for the Ministry of Health in Brazil when I was 20 something, just out of college. And
Wow.
I was a psychologist. And once I started working in a very big national policy on chronic disease prevention in Brazil, I understood how informal everything was being done. And it made me really uneasy to think, oh my God, big decision, so many billion reais, which is our money spent here, and we are completely unsure what is the potential of this policy to achieve a result. So when I became this civil servant, many colleagues also went through the same selection process that I went, and I found in different ministries many people with the same questions in their heart. And at one moment specifically, after a long battle with the most evidence-informed policy that we had being rejected by our legislative, I decided I needed to resign and create a space to support civil servants and government workers and decision makers from the outside, because from the inside it would just hurt so much. So we created this organization. It's an NGO, Instituto Veredas. We'll turn 10 this year, which is really exciting.
Happy birthday.
And ever since we've been trying to inform both government but also civil society decision making with the best available evidence.
Wow. So I know when I started my process, and many people, we talk about how we need these structures and you need these tools and et cetera. But your work really suggests that it's the relationships and the trust and the informal pathways, which is what I've come to realize in the last, decade. The structures are important, but without those relationships and those informal pathways, you may not be successful in forming policy, in evidence-informed policy. So what have you learned about how evidence actually moves in these real-world policy settings?
Yeah, I think the first thing was to recognize that policy settings, they are not rational. They are really emotional. People are elected because someone really believes in them and really wants to see that agenda. They care about these agendas, right? They want to see it come to fruition. So it's really naive of us to believe all you need is a tool or a structure to institutionalize evidence use. You need to get into this arena of very complex emotions in the end of the day. And people want to trust ideas, they want to trust policies, but the dispute is really unfair. If you have disinformation and if you have loads of information also at the same time in the internet. And the alternative for evidence-informed policy making often is expert opinion or just tying yourself to one or two groups that produce loads of knowledge and seem to be truth bearers. So the trust in the relationships, they are really, really important in the sense of building an alternative pathway for people to understand, demystify a little bit evidence, because when we speak from a scientist background, it becomes so hard and difficult. So it's not really trustable because you don't understand how we came to that conclusion, right? So we work really, really hard on trying to understand policymakers and decision makers on what is their pain, what they are needing, what is most urgent, trying to respond at a fast pace so they are not stuck with a problem for too long alone, recognizing that they are facing criticism for every pathway in their lives, including the supporters. So everyone who's trying to bring evidence to the table needs to be as supportive as possible. And then again, once you create the demand space for evidence, it increases so fast. So you need networks of people responding to this. Otherwise, you create the demand and leave people without an answer. And I used to work with cancer screening, and we always debated like, what is the use of a woman with a exam in their hands that show a problem in their body if you can't get this woman to care, right? And the same process is to evidence informed policymaking. If you create awareness and you bring people to believe in that, but then you are not able to respond with a network that you can easily assess, you just created frustration. So understanding the role of emotions, and maybe it's my psychologist background there, was really key. And I felt it as a civil servant, so I have loads of empathy for my colleagues who are trying to make the best policy possible with so many conflicting information coming their way at the same time. So this is why we really, really work so hard on building relationships, on understanding priorities. This takes probably 60% of our time. And then getting the answers becomes so much more easier when you have this group of stakeholders that really believe in the process.
So I don't know how it is in Brazil, but in Israel, I hear from a lot of my students, yes, we know relationships are important, but the older the policymakers, et cetera, they already have their pre-existing relationships. So how do we get in there? How do we create that trusting relationship if we can't even get our foot in the door? So
Yeah, I have a very controversial answer. So
we love
I think,
controversy at IS-PEC.
no, no, what I mean by controversial is just that we made a decision from the get-go that we only speak with civil servants that are very low in the hierarchy of policymaking. So we don't aim for the minister or the main person or the person whose face is in the newspaper, because indeed this is an agenda very hard to dispute. But in the end of the day, if you understand that policy is made mostly from the ground up and not necessarily from the sky down, um, you really have great segues into policymaking with the day-to-day civil servants that are invisible. They are the ones who are most motivated to work with evidence. They are the ones whose work you need to make easier. And they are the ones whispering in the end of the day on the ears of these probably older, whiter uh, policymakers that have quote unquote the power, but they really depend on these laborers of every day to make their decisions, to sign papers. They are not drafting their own technical notes or policy papers. So in the end of the day, I think we try to go for the groups that will stick there, especially in Brazil, where politics and the policy cycles are so unstable. We are always on turmoils. We need to work with the people who will survive all of the madness. And usually this is not the president or the minister. They will change every 4 years. If we are lucky, probably every two. In Brazil, we face a lot of changes in the past 10 years since Veredas was created, right? So sticking with these colleagues who are in the day to day and who are able to go to capacity sharing opportunity to learn from that, to test with their own hands what difference does it make to have a rapid review or an evidence gap map in their hands, and they become enchanted by it. I can't use another word. And then they bring this to the higher table. We've done this in so many ministries in Brazil, and then like after some years of civil servants whispering evidence, 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 then suddenly the person in the most powerful position is including this in the discourse because it's written by a civil servant, you know? So I think this is the way we chose. I don't know this works in all places, but in Brazil it was really, really important for us to go for the mid-level or low-level policymaker as an entry point and not aim for the stars, literally.
I love it. I love it because that's thinking out of the box and just getting the work done. I love it. You've worked extensively on evidence use across Latin America and the Caribbean. So, what are some of the regional strengths or innovations that you think the broader global community can learn from or doesn't fully appreciate?
Yes, it's so many. I'm so passionate about my region, and I often try to not speak too highly about what we are doing, so I don't sound obnoxious. But I think the first thing is and this is very much a social technology, right? We don't take ourselves too seriously. We are not perfectionists. We are people who, as you said, we want to get the job done. So if this means that we need to adapt some shortcuts, if this means that we need to like put our hands in the dirt and really try to seek for the best available evidence, even if it's not a gold standard, we'll go for that. You know, we just want things to be used and then receive feedback and then better ourselves. I think this is more of a attitude that I really recommend whoever is working. And it's really easy for Latin American and the Caribbean people to do that because we have become used to being underdogs, you know. But I think what our region is really good doing is the contextualization. So we understand that global evidence has loads of value, but we have very specific regional necessities and very specific cultures and a lot of diversity. So if we don't get this evidence to be valued and perceived from different groups in the same way, we are losing the chance of this being implementable. So many of my colleagues are really focused on contextualization or engaging stakeholder groups in appraising the evidence or bringing the evidence debate to civil society and not only policymakers. And I think this is a really big strength in our region. It also helps that we share many of the same problems. So to build a regional agenda, it's not hard. And then to learn from each other becomes really easy as well. And we have this disposition of learning from each other very easily in spite of the language barriers and some country level differences. But I think the contextualization is probably the technology that I'm most amazed to see how fast it develops and how much brings different voices to the table.
And it sounds like learning from each other is easy also because there's no ego involved. You just want to get the work done. So that's great.
You said it, not me.
No, well, I'm quoting what you said, 5 minutes ago. I'm quoting yourself to you. Um, you've also been engaged in conversations about institutionalizing evidence use. So, what initiative are you most proud of?
So we've been, as you mentioned, working with the EVIPNet, which is the Evidence Informed Policy Network, which is hosted by the World Health Organization, and in Brazil is hosted by our Ministry of Health. And we learn so much from the tools. Then again, as I said, tools are also important, right? Relationships are big, but tools, they can bring a matter of fact portion that is really needed when we are doing this work. And one of the tools that we are really excited about and piloting across our region and also in Brazil is the WHO checklist on institutionalization, because it helps us to understand some domains of institutionalization and helps us to understand that institutionalization is a process as well as a destination, a journey as well as a destination, in the sense that when you are facing political instabilities, as many countries are right now, right, you don't need to guarantee necessarily all domains. Aiming for all domains of institutionalization is setting yourself to frustration. But there are some key domains that work really well in having resilience to face this turmoil. So one of the domains is indeed partnerships, so the relationships. One of the domains is governance. So having these normatives and all of that. One of the domains is standards. So my colleagues who are more methodological, they really like to have standards and practices that are procedural. And this is also really good when you have embedded institution in a ministry to everyone to understand the step by step of what you're doing. But then building the culture around evidence use is another domain, and guaranteeing some resources, both human and logistical, are also really important. So these six domains, they play with each other in a way that maybe sometimes the governance drops because our government just changed, but then you can keep the relationships going and the networks going and the collective support going until you have a new governance standing up again. And I think this is a work that I really am fascinated about, because we've tested this both in the Brazilian government. We have now embedded units in our Ministry of Health, Human Rights and Citizenship, in the Agriculture Development and Family Farming. We have a National School of Public Administration and a National School of Health who have rapid response services serving all of the government. And this is how you're going to institutionalize, right? You're going to build the capacity in different places to serve decision makers, even when governments are changing, our policy environment is changing. And I think this is a work that we are really, really proud, and it's really connected to the development of these tools as well.
Nice. Okay, so one final question, and I think it leads off of the answer to the last question, but across your work, what gives you the most hope right now about the future of evidence-informed decision making in Brazil and in your region?
I am so hopeful, right? I'm a
It comes across, I
optimist
see. Yeah, it's you're
to the end,
passionate,
yeah.
it's amazing.
But it's really, you see, as I told you, we've been now in this NGO that I work for. We've been working here for 10 years, and these 10 years couldn't be described in an odyssey. In Brazil, they were so crazy politically. We faced the pandemic, we faced floods in my hometown, we faced everything you can imagine happened here in Brazil during this time. But the evidence community has grown and has become stronger, and this is also mirroring now experiences in our region in Latin America and the Caribbean. So I'm hopeful because I see more people believing that evidence is not something mysterious or hard or that only scientists can do. I see more people understanding the value of transparency to sustain democracies. So evidence plays a huge part there. I see more people careful about the use of AI and really trying to understand how evidence can contribute to a responsible and safe use of artificial intelligence. So once you have so many diverse people sharing a same belief and advancing both very soft technologies and hard technologies with the softwares and all of that is now becoming, you can click a button and have most of the work done. So you can dedicate all of your time to contextualization, to equity, and people are aware of that and they are putting more effort into incorporating qualitative evidence, incorporating stakeholder views, guaranteeing that evidence is implementable, that it can translate from a paper to a practice, right? I think this brings me hope, a huge community that is really diverse and it's not niched and it's not only of experts. There are loads of generalist people who are coming to the table now. And this makes me happy. I'm happy to find difference and not only find the same people with the same characteristics in this community. And more types of evidence are being included and more people want to collaborate and see the value of collaborating. So this is what brings me joy and hope, and really keeps the work going every day.
Wow, Laura, they're very fortunate to have you in your position because people can quickly burn out in trying to get evidence into practice, but it seems like you're just as passionate as someone who, started this position a day ago. So it's really, they're very, very fortunate. Thank you for sharing your insights with us. And yeah, we'll be in touch.
Thank you so much. Very happy to be here with you.